This is why I love the Saturday show. Today, we always try to change it up. Today was going to be the last day of the very truncated farce impeachment. And since the president was given back, 2/3 or 75% of their time, we wanted to bifurcate the day. We're going to have Dr. Navarro give the presentation that should have been given about how the election was stolen. Then we wanted to end with kind of a look forward of the biggest issue of the day, which is the confrontation with the Chinese Communist Party, to kind of talk about what should have been done and then look forward. Of course, we got breaking. And Raheem normally on Saturday takes every now and again, maybe by Skype. He said, hey, last night, I said, why don't you just come in? And now we've got really the biggest breaking news story.
Now you're lucky I did.
Because now the establishment they sprung the trap. It wasn't just Nikki Haley and Peggy Noonan clutching her pearls in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. The trap really got sprung today, which is now they want witnesses. And here's what they want to do. And this was leaked, trust me, by people close to the president. They're blaming the misdirection play by Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham is to say, it's this liberal media is all over. Yeah, the liberal media got it from somewhere. What they're trying to do is get an exact timeline because they can't convict. And Raheem's brought it up that this is a farce about inciting a violent insurrection. And they don't have the votes to convict. They want to purge him. They want to purge him from the American political process. They want to make sure he's not a factor 2022 and most certainly cannot run in 2024. And so on broadcast TV, on ABC and CBS, that's what they wrote as a TV script. That not being enough, they went to the next thing. And what they're going to try to prove is that he jeopardized the nation's security because there is a moment of time and they want that timeline. And this was leaked by Mark Short, and that was the tell right there, Jim Acosta's tweet. They want to show that the vice president of the United States' life was in jeopardy, and most importantly, that the nuclear codes that are with the vice president were somehow not with him and in jeopardy of being taken. And that's what they're going to say, this guy, not just Orange Man bad, right? Orange Man dangerous. And this is how they're going to try to purge him. And that's why if they're opening this up, Peter Navarro ought to be the first witness we call for the further receipts. And we're so honored to have Frank Gaffney, a warrior with Reagan against the Soviet Union back in the 80s and now at the forefront, the tip of the spear. And this all ties back to the CCP.
It does.
It ties back to the fact they do not want this establishment, the Republican establishment, the Wall Street faction, the global corporatist faction, the guys in bed with the lobbyists. They don't want to convert. This new watchword is competition. We're going to be a competitor. We're going to be a super competitor. Super competitor means it's going to fall more. You're going to be even more of a serf than you are today. Okay? You're going to now get to be Lao Beijing. Remember, the whole model is built upon the slave labor of China. The slave labor of China makes you in the West, the United States in the West, nothing more than a Russian serf. That's why
Chinese serf.
This is why you're like an old Russian serf, but now you're a Chinese serf to the Chinese
Chinese characteristics.
Yes, with Russian serf with Chinese characteristics. This is why the very opening of the World Economic Forum's video shows the young 35-year-old kid, we don't own anything and we're going to be happy, right? You're definitely not going to own anything, and this is part of. And that's remember, we're not conspiracy theory here, but there are no coincidences. This effort today to do a call witnesses is to try to purge Donald J. Trump from the leader of the MAGA movement, from the leader of this populist nationalist movement, from the leader of America First, to the leader of the Republican Party, and from all political life. Here's what they want. They want your money. They want your votes. They want your muscle going door to door and knocking on doors. They want you to pay your taxes. They want you to send your sons and daughters all over the world, and they want you to keep your mouth shut. That's what they want. And this is where they didn't get Trump to date, and now they sprung the trap. And Lindsey Graham's going to sit there and go, I only voted for it so I could keep my voice in there so we could call our own witnesses. Lindsey Graham, you promised the president of the United States, you promised him, you and McConnell promised him in and out, short trial. Let's get this over with. Don't ever say the F word. If you ever say the F word, if the fraud word comes across your mouth, they're going to convict. So don't say the F word. So we tap danced around it, right? They argue the Constitution, which is fine. The due process, fine. First Amendment, fine. Right? Can't say the F word. We had to get Navarro up here today to talk about it. Can't say that. Right? And now see where you got it. And now they're going to have witnesses, and they're going to have all those guys around the vice president. Vice president was in jeopardy, and the buried lead, the nuclear codes were separated from him. We didn't, in this raving mob, the shaman and all the domestic terrorists that are really you, the audience, the MAGA movement is really domestic terrorists, right? The domestic terrorists almost had their hands on the nuclear code, and you're going to see excruciating detail of that time, and when calls were made from Tuberville, and when calls were made from McCarthy. And it was McCarthy's staff that leaked this to CNN about the phone calls between the president and McCarthy. This is a setup. There are no coincidences. And to see Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham out there saying this is the liberal media, liberal Twitter media. No, the facts didn't come. The facts got leaked to the liberal media. The facts came from people who are supposed to be Republicans. Mr. Raheem Kassam, then I want to introduce our guest, Frank Gaffney.
You know what I love about this is that over the last 24 hours, we've seen the case go from the president incited a violent insurrection to the president should have sent a tweet at 2:00 in the afternoon so that the vice president wasn't in. It doesn't. Firstly, the time again, it doesn't make sense. If the grounds of the Capitol were breached at a certain point in time, that certain point in time that they tell us, according to Steve Sun and according to the official record, is while the president was still speaking up at the ellipse. So not possible for him to have sent a tweet discouraging violence. Was he going to whip his phone out up on the podium and fire a tweet off about something that he didn't know was going on? And this is the beautiful thing about this, Steve, because as you keep saying, this is now no longer about the charge of incitement. It's no longer about what the draft. And so I want to hear from constitutional professors on this, because they have drifted so far away from the actual article of impeachment here that I'm not sure this process is covered by the impeachment process now. I think they've gone so far down a strange rabbit hole of just implicating the president. Remember this. They are saying that he did not send a tweet. That's what they're saying. He did not send a tweet calling people to stand down. That's what they're trying to get him on now. That's what all of their witnesses are going to be called to say. He knew that the vice president was in danger, the line of succession was in danger, and he refused to send a tweet. For them, they've complained for 5 years about his tweets, and now they say, he should have been sending a tweet. Now, what does that mean? What does that actually mean for how this witness process is going to play out? What you're going to hear is witness, and remember, they get to decide the rules. We are not guaranteed witnesses. The president's defense team is not guaranteed witnesses. At this point in time, they may well judge that only the opposition, only the Democrat House impeachment managers can call witnesses, and President Trump's team may not.
John Santucci, the producer over at ABC, one of the most doubting guys around, John Santucci, ABC News, sources just tweeted, sources close to President Trump are floored by what just happened. Stunned, stupefied, digesting all of this are the words they're hearing from the Trump camp. I want to repeat that. Sources close to President Trump are floored by just what happened. Stunned, stupefied. He was promised, and this was the Lindsey Graham. We've been on this for 3 weeks now. McConnell and his running dog Graham sold the president of the United States on a guarantee. Take some incoming, take some heat. It's going to be bad for a day or two, but we're going to get out of here quick. We're going to wrap this up. It's why they took 2.5 hours yesterday. Remember, the number one issue in information warfare the Democrats do, when you've got the time, use the time. They used every second that they had and played videos over and wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, particularly when you got broadcast television and low information voters that don't read Politico and don't come in the war room. Right? What they do is they sit and they see these videos. Wow, that's pretty compelling. Look what Trump did. These guys are crazy. These guys are terrorists, right? These are dangerous people, right? That's it. President's wrapped up in 2.5 hours. By the way, I calculated last night, I think an hour of it was playing the best thing they had with the videos, played them over and in. But I'm saying, hey, make them sit there and watch that for 8 hours. Take up the time. You got broadcast TV time. Why not take it? And now you're seeing John Santucci around. President Trump and the team were caught totally blindsided by this. Stunned, stupefied, digesting us. Also, they're talking about Santucci then tweets, huge fights in lawyer land. The lawyers were already disunited about how to go about this in the first place. Now they're fighting amongst themselves. We're having other reports. We're going to get to you. Frank, before we talk about China, you've been in this. You guys get in front.
Come closer. Sorry. No, to the mic.
You got those. You got those. The Frank Gaffney show's got those great mics. We got these. No. You've been in this town a long time, and there's no one more cynical than Frank Gaffney about the way this town works. Please explain to me and our audience what has gone on here, right? How has this transpired that now we're into a full trial with witnesses when they're supposed to do 2 hours closing arguments and be having lunch by 3 o'clock today. Now, game on.
There's a lot there. Let me just back the lens up for a second to talk about personal experience, if I can, Steve. One of my principal takeaways from watching the prosecution here was everybody knew there was going to be an attack on the Capitol. It still hasn't been quite made clear how it is that nobody did anything.
You mean the intelligence services, FBI, everybody?
Joint task forces, Capitol Police, Nancy Pelosi. How is it nobody did anything?
Frank, we're up here. We said
that,
we said that day the day before. Now, Frank, this is how cynical you are. They had the bicycle racks in the Capitol. By the way, people should know the nicest people in Washington are the Capitol Hill Police.
Mostly.
I don't want to say they're ushers because they do a policing function, but they're not Navy SEALs. It's not a SWAT team, right? It's not special operations.
People who are politically selected,
right,
by members of Congress to serve on the police
and good
force.
Good people, and they've got some special kind, but
they do an important job.
You had the bicycle racks, and you had the Capitol Hill Police.
Everybody, we're told, knew there was a threat.
So you're next going to talk about the Joint Task Force.
Joint Task Force on Terrorism.
And DOD.
Were apparently apprised that there was a problem. There was an FBI bulletin out. So what on earth was going on? So let me flash forward. We're now being told the vice president was separated from the codes. Now, a lifetime ago, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Forces Policy in Ronald Reagan's Pentagon. And in that job, at least back in the day, the vice president, if he were in fact even equipped with the football, would not have had an active football because the president of the United States had an active football, and you don't have two of them decide, I'm going to send him off today.
Some guy could freelance.
Right. And more to the point, it's not like it's seen in the movies that it's just a button. Boy, he's got his finger on the button. There are codes. Right. You need somebody to enable it so that the vice president can do his particular part. Anyway, we were a long way from having a nuclear threat.
But for the emotion, remember,
from the bull, if he did,
this is all pathos, not logos.
It's drama.
Drama. What they want to show is that Pence being around there without protection, guys saying "Hang Mike Pence," right? Trump not doing anything, getting a phone call, having the code guy say, "Hey, yeah, I had a football." Might have been the backup football, but had a football. The question gets to be, why does even the vice president have an active football? Hey, just saying.
Well, I don't think it was active. Is the point?
Well, even if to have something around, just saying, what's the whole situation with that? But they're going to try to prove emotionally he jeopardized, and this has to come from people around Pence.
Of course.
Don't believe the left wing media part. We've got about a minute, Raheem.
Who jeopardized if they had knowledge that there was going to be this situation and had the vice president in there with the football? At that point, whose role is it to make sure that wasn't going to be the case, right? But again, just to recap on this, what we're being told now is that they wanted the president to send some kind of stand down order to these people on Capitol Hill. Number one, you interview any of these people, talk to the people who actually were in the violent part of this. They weren't watching Twitter for a message from the president. Are you nuts? This was a pre-planned, pre-motivated attack, right? They didn't care
about them.
This is what I'm saying. It's Antifa. It's some of these far right groups that they're not pro-president. A lot of them
from Nancy Pelosi might have done
a lot something. Of them a lot of them. Some of them are anti-Israel. They're not going to listen to the president. Anti-Semitic. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. Frank Gaffney. The question I asked Frank Gaffney before we get to China: we're living in an armed camp. This looks like Kabul. What's the justification? He's a national security expert. What's the threat? And what does the state of Texas and Florida think the threat is to have National Guard troops up here with razor wire? Next on War Room Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Raheem, between blowing up the Washington Post and their big front page story, taking on Dr. Yan and myself, Raheem Kassam, National Pulse, more importantly, Natalie Winters, all over this, okay? Keep an eye on what's happening, breaking when you got to. We got to get to China and the CCP, and I got to ask Frank. We'll get back to the Capitol and occupied Capitol later in the show. By an executive order signed by the President of the United States in 2018, because of the Russia, all the Russia hoax and fiasco, and I think there's a good executive order. The Director of National Intelligence is obligated within 45 days of a federal national election to report to the President of the United States if there was any foreign interference by the 17 agencies that report to him in a consolidated report. That date was missed. In fact, that report was handed in, I think, a couple of days before the end of the President Trump's first term. DNI actually said in there that the reason it was late is that the CIA had essentially, in our vernacular, slow-walked it. But he reported that there was involvement in the 2020 election by the Chinese Communist Party. The implications were, and as we reported, it sounded like some sort of massive involvement at the Wuhan 50 Cent Army, social media, things like that. Then you've got the guys, and look, we're not the Dominion Smart Tech guys. We said that from day one. I think it's a free option, has to be investigated. But you do have people who say, hey, what really happened was a massive cyber attack, and they were involved. You're the co-founder and the head of the Committee on the Present Danger of China. You now have dedicated your life to this. Tell people, in this election, what do you believe, from the evidence you've seen, was the involvement of the Chinese Communist Party on November 3rd in the lead up to November 3rd?
Again, context, Steve, and you cover this massively so your audience is generally clear about it. The Chinese Communist Party seeks the destruction of the United States. That's their job. They have regarded Donald Trump as a mortal threat to the success of that mission. So they have, for years, set their sights on taking him out, preventing the re-election. One piece of the Chinese Communist Party's plan for doing just that, of course, was COVID, or the CCP virus, as I think it's more accurately described. Do massive destruction.
Hold on, I got to stop you right there, because we're going to get blown up, so I just want to make sure we're getting blown up the right way. When you say CCP virus and you say part of the thing, do you believe, you just saw WHO just goes over the other day, and I'm pulling up my favorite propaganda paper for the Party of Davos. WHO team says Wuhan lab leak, highly unlikely source of virus. Now, this is from a couple of days ago. They've already walked this back, I think part of it because of the show. They said, we haven't come to a final conclusion, and oh, by the way, we didn't get the raw data. Are you telling us, because of the Trump and got to get rid of Trump, is it your position that you believe that the Wuhan lab and what came out of the Wuhan lab was part of a biological weapons program by the Chinese Communist Party?
There's no doubt in my mind that this virus came out of a lab associated with an illegal biological weapons program, Steve. Whether it was engineered for the purpose of killing hundreds of thousands of Americans or doing immense damage to our economy or simply leaked out of there
inadvertently,
because it was part of experimentation and it got away from them, I have no idea. We may never know. But my strong belief is once it was out, they exploited it as they would a biological weapons attack. And they used it particularly for the purpose, with their friends here, of trying to make sure that Donald Trump was massively damaged in the process.
Okay, I want to go back to one thing that you can explain to this audience. You said illegal biological weapons program.
Right.
What the constraints on biological weapons or research are among the most restrictive in the world, more restrictive than either some of our nuclear treaties. Explain to people why anything they would have to do with any of this would be in direct violation of commitments and treaties they've signed.
The 1972 Biological Weapons Convention prohibits anything to do with biological weapons. Having them, developing them, testing them, using them. It is completely unverifiable. No effort was made in the treaty to have any verification at all, and consequently, every bad actor on the planet, as best I can tell, has a continuing illegal biological weapons program, and the Chinese Communist Party, we have very high confidence, is among them, including the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So when these guys, the running dogs, I think is the Chinese term for it, of Beijing, go and say, nothing to see here, folks. Actually, look over there, folks.
To the wet market, to the bad cave, to the bad
frozen
cave,
foods, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, imported frozen food from Australia.
Or the UK or something.
Yeah.
Never mind That is a tell, as you like to say, Steve. So anyway, the point is COVID was one of the lines of attack. Another line of attack, of course, was the involvement of the Chinese Communist Party with Antifa, with Black Lives Matter, with Liberation Road, with Freedom Road, socialist organizations.
Give us your evidence of that. Back us up on that. You're saying they're back of these cultural Marxist radical organizations. How do you say?
One of our colleagues at the Committee on the Present Danger of China, Trevor Loudon, has done some fantastic analysis and research of this and has worked through the relationships between outfits like the Chinese Progressive Association and the Chinese Friendship with Foreign Countries Association, and specifically Liberation Road, which is a full-on Maoist communist organization in the United States, and Freedom Road Socialist Organization from which it splintered off. And they are directly tied into Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
So I've got the CCP COVID-19. I've got their involvement with Antifa and these radical groups, radical elements of BLM and others.
Yep.
What's the third line of vector?
Seed the Vote. Seed the Vote. This is an organization that has many offshoots that were supported by the Chinese Communist Party. Again, I believe the Chinese Progressive Association out of San Francisco and Boston was the vehicle for doing some of this. The purpose of this was to register pro-Marxist minorities, principally, and swing red states to blue, including notably in Georgia, usually with sort of subsidiary outfits that have as their specific mission changing the votes in those states. And many of them declared that they succeeded after the election was over. Now, that's a long-term effort, Steve. That wasn't just done overnight. Those guys were working to register folks. And by the way, it occurs to me, coming at it from a national security perspective, was there some residual benefit to the Chinese Communist Party from identifying all kinds of Americans who could be recruited not just for the purposes of registering for votes, but perhaps for their purposes? And then there's the cyber stuff, as you say. And some of that was clearly just disinformation, out in emails and the like. And I personally believe, there is some evidence that there was Chinese direct involvement in some of these electronic tabulation devices as well. So you put all of this together, and there's doubtless more. I mean, just the general agitation. You remember when they went after the farmers in response to Trump's tariffs?
Yes.
There was all kinds of stuff, the main point of which was to make it virtually, if not actually, impossible for Donald Trump to be reelected. That was direct interference in our election, and it's what they do, among many other lines of attack that we ought to talk about, too.
We're going to get to the next segment. I want to quickly get a couple of minutes here. We've faced down the Soviet Union, right? We, under Trump, I think did an excellent job of destroying the physical caliphate of ISIS and confronting radical jihad in this country. Not perfect, but directionally. How does this rate? Is this the greatest existential threat the country's ever faced, the Chinese Communist Party, or where does it rank with the enemies we've had before?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's even a close call. I mean, you could go back to Imperial Britain at the time of the Revolution as the greatest power in the world at the time. But when you look, Steve, at the intentionality of the Chinese Communist Party, especially under Xi, to destroy us and to pursue people's war, as they have formally declared, to engage in unrestricted warfare against us, to include, by the way, a data point which I don't know if you've talked about here or not, Chi Haoqian, the former defense minister of China, saying that Deng Xiaoping back in early 1990s set in train this biological warfare program for the purposes of depopulating the United States with biological weapons so it could be colonized by the Chinese. I mean, these are signs of a determination, actually not just to have the aspiration of destroying us, but to pursue it relentlessly. And they have.
Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to return talking about Chinese strategy and tactics with Frank Gaffney, a CCP. Raheem, any breaking news? My phone's blowing up with activities going on about these witnesses. Where do we actually stand right now? Vote's been taken, and this is a done deal?
Yeah, it does look like it's, as you say, a done deal. 5 Republicans joined the Democrats in the witness vote, and the name that keeps floating around now is Jamie Herrera Buettler. This is the Republican congresswoman
From Washington,
who is said to have basically made the call that she needs to be a witness in really, because she was told about the conversation between Leader McCarthy and Donald Trump on the day of January the 6th. So she's being sort of used as the driving force behind all of this. Even Senator Marco Rubio taking to Twitter saying, hey, how can this possibly take place? How can we drag this out? And how could you possibly have witnesses on one side and not on the other?
Has that been determined? Is this going to be witnesses for the prosecution?
I do not believe it's been determined yet, but that is the fear.
Okay. Peter Navarro's back in the bullpen. This is a fracas. But hey, they want to bring witnesses. Let's bring witnesses. Let's throw down. We've been wanting that. We want this. We want to show. We want to use the F word, the fraud word, the low-hanging fruit before you even get to the machines. Voter fraud, ballot fraud, election fraud. All next. CCP. War and Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
By the way, the question, the audience is blowing up, and the question they got is a greater, more existential threat to us, Frank, given your years of experience here, the snakes in Washington, D.C., particularly around the president, or the Chinese Communist Party? Because right now it's probably a coin flip, isn't it?
Well, it's if you could separate the two, it would be easier to make that call. This is the problem, Steve, as I was saying earlier. You actually have people on both sides of the aisle, in the executive branch, in the legislative branch, probably in the judicial branch for that matter too, who have been compromised by the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay, we did the hard drive from hell. Look at Tony Blinken had the consulting firm, Executive Row, which is between the West Wing and the Executive Office building. They got nothing but Chinese clients. You've got him involved in somehow in this University of Pennsylvania fundraising of CCP money coming to universities. You got Jake Sullivan up there at the Belfort Center. And now we got the Shorenstein Center up there in Harvard.
Story's going up in about 3 minutes.
3 minutes, putting out nothing but propaganda. By the way, the Department of Education found they were taking the Ivy League schools, particularly my alma mater, Harvard, taking hundreds of millions of dollars from the CCP and never really reporting exactly where it's
get around to it.
Didn't get around. It's an administrative thing. We're going to get to that. Not really ever showing that CCP money. This is worse than the Saudis funding all the stuff at Georgetown, all that. This is 10x that. You've got.
Don't forget the Penn Biden Center as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Tony Blinken's the Penn Biden Center, right? Blinken's all over that. You've got the hard drive from who actually his voice says yelling at a guy because the New York Times is hunting him down for a story saying, "Hey, I'm in business with the top spy of the CCP." Now he had that wrong. Guy is a spy, not the top, but he says the top spy in the CCP.
I'm sure he'd been told he was the top.
Exactly. So compromise. I keep saying the hard drive from hell. People came for the porn, but they stayed for the compromise. Right? the compromise was. And by the way, the porn's a compromise too, because remember that's how they get you with the honeypot. Ask Congressman Swalwell. Right. They get you with the honeypot, or they get the bad stuff about you. Sexually, they use that over your head like the Soviets used to do, but now they got money. They're spreading money everywhere. Question the audience is asking, how did all this facts we're putting out every day, you got a lab that may be a bioweapons program, but certainly not high and tight. And it turns out Tony Fauci, and by the way, Daszig, the guy that's the chief investigator for WHO, he's the conduit for U.S. money. The U.S. taxpayer is putting money into gain-of-function experiments in something even the French got kicked out is not run. Forget whether it's the PLA or not, because that's bad enough and you're going to find that that's true. But it's not at the level it should be. How does that happen? I thought, aren't there national security checks in these budgets? You're the national security guy. Doesn't the taxpayer could go to bed at night knowing that their tax dollars are not going to fund our enemies' programs?
I wish I could tell you that were the case, Steve. I don't think it is. I think in the instance of Tony Fauci, and look, you've done more in this program than anybody else to document what a bad guy this fella has been. But manipulating budgets of the NIH to migrate funds to do work he wasn't allowed to do in the United States with, yes, taxpayer dollars, I suspect is not something that was subjected to any kind of national security review. I think there was a national security review that said, don't do it here. But then when he decided he would just go do it in what I believe is properly identified as a bio-level 4 biological weapons facility of the People's Liberation Army is insane.
We got little time. I got to grind through a lot. You've been a guy that warned America years ago, Frank. And this is another thing. He said Frank Gaffney's crazy. I say it's interesting. When you say Frank Gaffney's crazy, it always turns out it's kind of like Miles Gore. It always turns out they're right. You were all over the grid for years saying the grid is not secure. Then we finally got Trump focused on the grid, trying to secure it, trying to impact your stuff with executive orders. One of the first. So I want to go through the strategy of Biden with the strategic patient, but what he's doing now with these executive orders, because that's not strategic. He's now, and this is from Quinn Hillier at the Washington Examiner, big story the other day. Biden's order would let China control U.S. electric grid. Tell people, what is the threat of our grid? And you've seen California, all those blackouts because of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Green New Deal, right? But the grid is still in jeopardy, and now we got the Chinese. Trump ran them out of there, and now Biden's, I think, first or second executive order lets them back in. What in the hell is going on?
It's a great question. When I was back in that job in the Pentagon, I was first exposed to this problem as a highly classified matter because we knew as a military that you could take out electronic systems with things like electromagnetic pulse or cyber warfare in some cases, and even physical sabotage. Well, that was true in spades of this completely unprotected, most critical of critical infrastructures, our electric grid. In 2004, as a result of a congressional commission being stood up, an unclassified report was put out saying this is a huge problem. The best people in the country with knowledge of this stuff were warning from that day basically to this, Steve, that we had to urgently fix this because, as the chairman of the commission, old friend and colleague of mine by the name of Dr. William Graham, said in congressional testimony, if the grid goes down and stays down for a year, 90% of the population of the United States is going to die.
Give me that one again.
We simply can't survive.
Give me that again.
Well, think about it in your own life. How long would you last without electricity? 90% of the population of the United States will not make it if the grid is not viable.
This is a congressional report.
This was testimony to Congress.
90% of the American population would die within 1 year if the grid goes down.
And the Chinese communists and the Russians and the North Koreans and the Iranians and any other enemy we've got understand this full well. In fact, they've all integrated it as part of their doctrine to take down the grid. So this brings us to your question, Steve. Donald Trump, actually, interestingly enough, you know Dr. Peter.
Yes.
Dr. Pry, at an event that we held in Iowa in about June of 2015, first was briefed on this problem by Peter Pry. And he said, what on earth is going on? And then he responded when he was told, he said, when I'm president, I'm going to fix this problem, which nobody else had done, of course. He got to be president. He introduced not just one executive order on the subject, but two. The second one is the one that Biden put on hold. The second one simply said we don't want foreign equipment, adversaries of our country, providing foreign equipment to our grid. Why? Because obviously that would intensify the vulnerabilities of it. Biden put that thing on hold. We believe there's an opportunity, having learned what we have just recently, which is not only that there's a danger of more stuff being put into the grid, there are 200 to 300 large transformers from China in the grid today, one of which they boasted when they installed it supplies 10% of the power for the largest city in the United States, New York City. What could possibly go wrong?
Let's go. We're on to, I want you to tell the audience, in your mind, you've been at this a long time, what is the strategy of the Chinese Communist Party to take us down? You said their number one mandate is to destroy the United States of America.
I believe that.
What do you think, when they look strategically, what are the moves and how quickly are they trying? Is this a 100-year plan, as Pillsbury says? Do you think it's the 2049, the 100th anniversary of their winning of the Civil War? what do you think the timeline is, and where should if people are trying to think of the other side of the hill, which we try to get people to do, where do you think people should be focused?
Look, Steve, people might quibble and say, well, wait a minute. No, their number one priority is dominated the whole world. It's just that they have to take us down to get to that point. I'm agnostic on whether it's A or B, but the point is we're in the way and we must be taken out. And the only guy since basically the CCP came to power who really got that, well, at least since Nixon, was Donald Trump. And he stood in the way and he had to be removed. And they've used, I mentioned this earlier, Steve, a doctrine, as you know, a strategy of what two People's Liberation Army colonels published back in 1999 was unrestricted warfare. And that means using every possible means of waging war against this country. The most obvious to most people has been the economic warfare, of course, where they hollowed out our economy, they destroyed our industrial base, they took millions of jobs from us, they, laid waste basically to the livelihoods of the middle class. But that's just one of the lines of attack. They've used your friends on Wall Street to fund a lot of the terrible things that they've been doing. They have also been engaged, of course, in things like, biological attacks against us, as we've talked about. They have used the use of information operations on college campuses, yes, but also elsewhere. They've taken over Hollywood. They've been using these big tech giants to help them gain supremacy in artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Theft of intellectual property, stealing it when they need to, buying it when they can.
$600 billion a year.
Immense amounts of money, not just for the purposes, of course, of ensuring their future economic dominance, but also the military as well. And then there's the buildup of the military and the increasing threats that it represents to us in addition. So you put all this together, and I believe they are well advanced, probably ahead of schedule. I don't think this is going to take them to 2049. I don't think they think it's going to take them that much longer, especially if they now have essentially taken out the guy who was standing in the way and replaced him with, as you said, Steve, starting with Joe Biden, a deeply compromised commander-in-chief, with Kamala Harris, a creature of the San Francisco Democratic Party machine, which is thoroughly compromised. Witness Dianne Feinstein, witness Nancy Pelosi, witness Eric Swalwell, witness Ted Lieu, on and on. You've got people who now are running our government, Blinken, Sullivan, Burns at the Central Intelligence Agency, on and on, Colin
Eli
going
Ratner,
into
Eli
DOD.
Ratner.
You just look at their pedigrees, and these are people that
Kurt
I
Campbell.
think the Chinese are confident they will be able to tell.
When people hear
and
this,
here, just the thought, 2 hours spent on the phone with Joe Biden. What could possibly have taken that long? The readout doesn't suggest anything. I believe they were taking orders.
Right down to the commands. I got the one right. What about, I wanted the buzzword you're hearing, we got to compete. We have to be super competitors. That's that's a misdirection play, right?
If it were true, it would be one thing. But I don't think they even are doing that. But it's a substitute for recognizing him as an adversary that must be defeated, not accommodated or competed with.
Okay, we got a lot to get through. We got to take a break. Got a lot to get through. I got to get Marianne Mendoza on here about what Biden's doing at the wall in the commemoration of her son. She's going to join us, the angel mom. Raheem, you're going to give me an update, and Frank Gaffney is going to tell us at least how to get access to him. We're going to have him back next week. We got to continue this.
Great.
Navarro, this is everything. Look, if we don't sort out this problem, when I say sort out this problem, look, 4 minutes into Biden's administration, I was sanctioned formally by the Chinese Communist Party. Pompeo, Pottinger, Navarro, all the good guys, right? Myself as a civilian. It's a badge of honor, right? Because they understand they're trying to send a signal to Biden's guys, but they're trying to send a signal to anybody. If you stand up to us, we're going to sanction you, right? If you stand up for us, same thing happened in Hong Kong, same thing's happening in Taiwan. They have a well-thought-through geopolitical plan, okay? A well-thought-through, and they're vicious. And they have partners in Davos, they have partners in Brussels, they have partners in the city of London, they have partners on Wall Street, they have partners here in this city. And that's the reason they detest Donald Trump. This connects right back to the well of the Senate, what's happening here right now. Want to get witnesses? We'll bring some witnesses. How about bringing Frank Gaffney in to testify in the trial? Next, War and Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
We just crossed 35 million downloads on the podcast. We're live on John Frederick's Radio Network, Real America's Voice, Dish. I want to thank the guys in Denver. Been fabulous in helping us co-produce this show and get it up every day or 6 days a week. We got breaking news all over. I want to go to Marianne Mendoza at the border. She's one of the top angel moms. Marianne, real quickly, we've been talking about Biden's executive orders on China. People don't understand. This radical plan he's got now at the border is going to cause another crisis, just when we can't afford a crisis, particularly with COVID. These guys are supposed to be like the super COVID guys. Now they're opening up the borders. What is Biden doing? And I want to tie it back to your son.
The thing that our elected officials in D.C. were elected to do was to protect the sovereignty of our country, the safety and health of Americans, and our economy. And that's the three biggest things that an open borders will completely wreak havoc on here in our country. There's a doctor who's traveling with one of the caravans. There's over 400 people in it, and 164 of those people are COVID positive. People are dying along the way that he has no idea what diseases they have. He hasn't been able to identify them then as of such. And so these are the types of people that are heading towards our border.
I want to make sure everybody understands. There's a tragedy of biblical proportions in Central America. This is not to demonize these people. It's just the fact that, hey, you get up to the holding camps in Mexico, in northern Mexico, and then to the United States. This is a problem. Let's not spread the problem. Let's try to figure out and solve the problem at the source. It's not fair to those people to bring them up here to what's going to be just another nightmare, no matter what Biden's. So what executive orders has he signed?
Well, he's signed one just the other day that is going to allow the people who are in the MPP, the Remain in Mexico, they are going to be able, I think they're bringing 25,000 of them are going to be the first wave of them to come through. And so all of these people that have been waiting at the border under the great direction of President Trump, because we don't need these people in the interior of the United States, milking the American taxpayers for all the free programs they get and taking away American jobs when our economy is so bad. He's now bringing those people forward, allowing them to come into the interior of the United States and await their asylum cases. And those asylum cases are backed up over 3 years right now. So this just gives you an idea of how long these people are going to be wards of the American taxpayers.
Because of the efforts of President Trump, the angel moms were very supportive. Where do the angel moms stand now about Biden's executive orders?
We're very upset because we feel like, 4 years of Trump's hard work and all of the things that we brought to his attention, and he was very, kind and listened to our concerns, took those to heart and realized this was a bigger problem than mainstream media puts out there. There are over 4,000 Americans killed every single year by illegal aliens in our country. This problem is going to continue to grow. And what he is doing, there's not much thought being put into what he is doing, what the ramifications are going to be for American citizens.
And your son, last night was the anniversary of his death at the hands of an illegal alien, correct?
No, yesterday was his 39th birthday.
39th birthday.
May 12th was the day that he was killed in 2014. So, a fifth birthday has come and gone now, but I have not been able to be with my son, permanently separated. And the Democrats, the liberals in D.C. don't care about citizens like me. They didn't care about my son. They don't care about every American citizen that's been killed by an illegal criminal, and they will never address this issue. Name one piece of legislation that liberals have brought forward in the interest of Americans regarding illegal crime. That hasn't happened. All their legislation is directed at is protecting illegals and doing something for them to advance in our country.
Okay, we're going to have you on next week, Marianne. Angel moms and more angel moms to come on. This is outrageous what President Trump did to stop this. Now we're opening up the whole nightmare again. Marianne Mendoza, thank you very much. Honored to have you on.
Thank you.
Frank, how can people, we're going to have you back next week too, because we're so jammed for time with what's happening, because this is now going to be a complete fiasco, right? How do people, the reason this show's so powerful, it's an activist audience. People are just tired of listening to talk radio. They're tired of sitting there just listening to Fox. They want to get engaged. They know they need the Trump movement's been this great awakening, not just go around and do something. Right now, how should people get engaged? How can they find out more information, and what do you want them to do?
I'm going to give you the website of the Committee on the Present Danger of China, which, let me say, Steve, you were an indispensable catalyst for getting it stood up, and I appreciate that so much. PresentDangerChina.org is the site. It's got tons of videos
Fabulous.
that are short
Fabulous.
in form if you want them. There are longer forms, speeches, papers. We've got 5 really important policy papers that were initially drafted for the House China Task Force. We're going to try to get them in front of the new Biden China Task Force. But let me just give you a couple of action items that I think could really help focus on fixing this problem. Among the videos are about 18 of them, I think, that Kevin Freeman, one of our great colleagues,
Economic warfare, great.
Economic War, did on the unrestricted warfare threats. You can learn all about those in very brief form, 2 minutes, I think, apiece. Check those out, but help us get the Biden administration to do what Tony Blinken and Janet Yellen said they personally wanted to do, which is to designate the Chinese Communist Party as a genocidal regime for what it's doing to the Muslim Uyghurs and other minorities in Western China. While they're at it, they should also designate it as a transnational criminal
Big time.
organization,
Big
because both of those could have a very
We should have
powerful
done
effect
that. We should have done that in the
on
Trump administration.
the Wall Street guys and other business folks who are enabling and abetting.
How
the
do
bad
people
guys.
get to your? You've got your show now. You're the new 3:00 show on Real America's Voice. You got to watch it every day. Frank
Live.
gets you up to speed live. We're going to have Frank back on next week to get more. information.
SecuringAmerica.tv is a great one-stop shop site for that.
Give me that one again.
SecuringAmerica.tv.
Okay, every day at 3:00. Starting on Monday, it'll
Weekdays.
be weekdays. It would be right before War Room Pandemic, the 5:00 show. Raheem, you got to do a podcast today.
Fine.
Okay.
Fine.
I know
but
you're going to have to work.
Yeah,
Raheem's
twist my arm.
he likes the liquid lunch on Saturday.
I
You
was
gonna work?
actually looking forward to a workout this afternoon. Doesn't look like I'm going to get it. I'll do another vocal workout.
Intellectual workout.
Intellectual workout. The story is live, the lead story of the National Pulse right now. The Shorenstein Center, this entity that went after Dr. Yan yesterday, Natalie Winters worked overnight, got the receipts.
And after the War Room.
Right? And we have 1,500 words, probably about 30 to 40 hyperlinks in here, showing how this center is in the pocket of
The
Communist
Washington
Party.
the democracy dies in darkness. The Bezos, Amazon, Washington Post, not one word. They obscured this. They hid this. They lied about it. Okay, Natalie Winters, National Pulse, Raheem Hassan exposing all. What time will your podcast be up? You think?
4.
4:00. Raheem's going to get you up to speed and everything's happening. We'll be back Monday morning at 10:00. A lot happening. We'll be putting it up on the site nonstop. See you Monday.